I have serious concerns about the GGNRA proposal, which is why I called for this hearing and why I introduced a resolution.
My name is Frank Dean, and I'm the superintendent of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. This is a bounce, not a ban. It's often described as a ban on dogs. It's not at all.
Could it then go to a ban on dogs?
Potentially, yes.
So I was happy to hear that GGNRA would be working with the city. Will GGNRA be effectively negotiating with the city in order to take into account the needs of San Francisco and its residents?
I wouldn't characterize it as negotiating.
In the DEIS, it states that the GGNRA did consider the potential impacts on San Francisco and that there would not be any significant impacts. Am I right about that?
That's correct. That's what the document says.
Okay. And what did GGNRA do to come to the conclusion that there would be no significant impacts?
Well, it was not an exhaustive study. I will concede that.
Was there any numerical analysis that came?
No, there was not.
The study does not adequately speak to impact on lands outside of the jurisdiction of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area.
The mere fact of off-leash dogs being present does not lead to an automatic conclusion that those dogs have impact in an area that is also frequented by people without dogs or by people with dogs on leash, horses, hang gliders, the Park Service Rangers, ATVs, or other predatory wildlife.
So my name is Michael Hines. I'm the Conservation Director with the Golden Gate Audubon Society. And I'm here to speak on behalf of several members of our coalition, which include the Bay Chapter of the Sierra Club. A great blue heron was recently probably mauled at Heron's Head, but no one saw it. And whoever found that dead bird, which had what looked like teeth marks in it, draped it over the sign that said Wildlife Protection Area. It's a very comprehensive DIS. I would encourage the supervisors to read it independently and provide their own review.
Next, I want to invite up Ken Weiner. He is the former Deputy Director of the White House Council on Environmental Quality.
You know, when people like to cite legislative history, I like to go back to original sources. In describing part of the area in the city, the Senate and House reports both commented that the proposed area, quote, will satisfy the interests of those who choose to fly kites, sunbathe, walk their dogs, or just idly watch action along the bay. An EIS is required to examine the human environment. One of the most remarkable statements in this draft EIS is, quote, the quality of urban areas is not a significant factor in determining a dog management plan.
There is no federally designated critical habitat anywhere in the GGNRA. There's literally thousands of people who walk every day in the GGNRA with their dogs, and it's probably the most diverse group of park users that you're ever going to see. And we actually embody the Park Service's recently announced Healthy Parks, Healthy People campaign, yet they want to force us out. We've only ever been able to walk dogs off leash on 1% of the GGNRA land. It's important to remember 1%, yet they now want to cut that by 90%. Normally when you make such a dramatic cut, you need a really compelling reasons. And if you actually read through the 2,400-page DEIS, there's nothing there. They're not there. And believe me, they've been looking for them, and they don't see them. Well-known dog behavior experts say that off-leash exercise creates better-behaved dogs. Issues such as dog bites and aggression are far less common in San Francisco than nationwide, largely because there's so much off-leash access. This is not a pristine wilderness. It's located within the city limits of a city of 800,000 people. Fort Funston has a missile silo under the parking lot. These are not pristine wilderness.
Okay, we'll now go to public comment.
In my 20 years as a veterinarian in San Francisco and surrounding communities, I've noticed an interesting thing. I think it's a pattern that's associated with socialization. The dogs in San Francisco that I treat have to be muzzled far fewer times during regular routine handling than the dogs in surrounding communities.
By vastly reducing off-leash recreation in the GGNRA, that'll have a negative impact on tens of thousands of dog guardians and, of course, as has been mentioned, also the behavioral health of dogs.
I am disabled and I do not have a dog. Last year I had to undergo grueling medical treatments. I am weak and even coming here to comment is an effort. I have never encountered a more cohesive, caring, and self-policing community. I have met other disabled and senior folks who visit Fort Funston, and for many of the same reasons I do. Finding this community has been essential to my well-being, and I don't want to see it disappear.
Hi, Supervisors. I'm Arthur Feinstein. I'm Chair of the State Chapter of the Sierra Club and Conservation Chair of the San Francisco Group of the Sierra Club. Do dogs have an impact off-leash? All of us have been on the beach and seen dogs rush after these flocks of shorebirds on the shore, and the birds fly off. That's an impact. And it's one that actually results in death for many of those birds.
For me, I am a runner, and when I run by the beach, the birds also take off.
My name is Cheryl Travers, and I'm here representing senior citizens who own dogs. And I went to Fort Funston yesterday and just kind of took a little snapshot of what was going on. I just wanted to educate people on what recreating with a dog is, and that the fact that, it doesn't look very dangerous to me.
Agencies should focus their efforts on making the urban environment as enjoyable a place to live for as many people as possible in order to avoid the much greater impact that occurs when residents, feeling the pinch of restrictions, flee to the suburbs or rural areas where natural habitats are significantly more intact and therefore more vulnerable.
This is not Yellowstone.
We have a menacing dog statute already on the books in San Francisco County and City. I believe it's a matter of enforcement.
And people don't need to drive to the GGNRA. They could go locally.
Our city parks, for the most part, are fairly small. They're little areas. So it's difficult to get a long jog in those areas unless you want to just run around in a circle. Fort Funston will be empty. And so we'll have the opposite problem, as they were describing, where we have these big empty beaches and then just a mile or two away we have crowded parks.
1/3 of San Francisco households have dogs. Dog owners' own recreation is limited by the limits on their own dogs. Dog plan's no action option is misleading. It, in fact, still includes the compliance management, which would potentially lead to a total ban.
It is inevitable that the congestion on the trails will end in the elimination of off-leash recreation for all dogs based on the compliance ruling.
Anyone who's been in Central Park in New York in the spring recognizes what happens when you confine too many dogs in too small an area.
I'm also an environmental engineer, and I've taken a pretty broad look at this document in more of a scientific look on as far as environmental impact statements go, and I find it totally deficient in scientific data. I don't see the normal scientific data that's in these sort of reports.
I want to stress that dog play, off-leash and on-leash activities are very much a multi-generational activity. It's what binds families. It's what brings us to our parks in many cases.
I'm a research scientist. I'm shocked and appalled at what some of the people in uniform behind me call me science. Using and abusing data is appalling. I think that's how this country gets in trouble. Now we're looking at dogs of mass destruction. If you believe these people, they say that dogs kill birds, dogs injure people, dogs do all sorts of horrible things. And they've admitted at the same time there's no data for that. So I think we should take this entire plan, throw it out. Let's look at some real data. Maybe we'll find something else that helps our birds even more. Maybe the dogs are helping the birds by scaring away the cats.
We need to tell the GGNRA that you can't just slap together a bunch of data and then make a recommendation that isn't actually supported by the data. That's not okay.
This is my service animal, Lucy. Until 4 years ago, honestly, I really didn't like dogs. I've lived in the city for 11 years, and my solution was to go to places where there weren't dogs. It wasn't that hard to find. There's plenty of it.
Must I remind you that they were the unspoken heroes of 9/11? Dogs have changed human beings' lives. We domesticated them. We must take care of them.
Hardly seems that the way to encourage enjoyment of outdoor parks and appreciation of nature is through segregation of animals or by relocating them to the more urban San Francisco neighborhood parks.
And there is community there, both of those walking dogs and of those who don't have dogs and come there in order to see the dogs. This small, less than 1% off-leash area is a very important component of our lives.
I have never recreated in any of the GGNRA lands where off-leash dog walking is allowed until I adopted a dog.
The overcrowding would be horrendous.
it would make the dogs behave criminally, and it would make the owners behave criminally.
I find it ironic that the National Park Service is pushing the Healthy Parks, Healthy People program when they're cutting the 1% of the...
They're worried about the snowy plovers being stressed. I'm wondering if they're so stressed why they ride motorcycles up and down the beach.
We have the most beautiful thing in the city at Fort Funston.
I'm an auditor with over 15 years experience, and I have to say I'm shocked by the deliberate delays by the GGNRA in providing real data to citizens.
Speculation of what might happen, which runs counter to years of experience with what actually does happen, is not science.
So when the GGNRA announced their intent to do this DEIS in the Federal Register, I filed a Freedom of Information Act request to obtain the data, documents, and/or staff report which justify this current DEIS. The GGNRA's response merely stated, the staff report and other documents you seek do not exist at this time. So, we're not crazy. There is no data behind this DEIS. Ocean Beach and Crissy Field are not designated as critical habitat by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The study instead relied upon arbitrary, inadvertent disturbances, which could be as minor as the bird lifting its head or standing up. This DEIS failed to mention the 2007 joint UC Berkeley GGNRA Warren study that concluded plovers feeding was not negatively impacted by the recreational activities of humans and dogs. Skewing a scientific study to reach a predetermined outcome is unconscionable.
Unjustified draconian restrictions.
The proposed GGNRA restrictions are not even the end of the squeeze play. With their stealth provision to further limit off-leash areas in an unappealable, unilateral decision,
major writing and rewriting of history here. First of all, it is not a national park. It is a national recreation area.
This compliance-based management is really, in reality, the poison pill of their preferred alternative. We dog guardians are contributing citizens of the United States. We are not outlaws. The National Park Service should be ashamed of even proposing such a scheme.
And I've been organizing a lot of this because I used to work for the National Park Service, and I think that they're lying. This is Crissy Field at the little inlet that they want to keep us from being at. This inlet is full of kids and dogs every sunny day.
As a trainer, I can't overstate the importance of appropriate off-leash exercise for dogs to prevent behavior problems. Leashing, restricting, and confining dogs to fenced areas will create more conflict, not less. Dogs who feel restrained and overcrowded are more likely to display reactive and aggressive behaviors.
But if we're not going to leash the children, then probably a better solution is to identify the really critical habitats, fence them off, and then free the beasts and the children.
I'm very concerned about the 75% compliance, as are many people. I see it as equivalent to, if 10 people run a red light, then you close off the intersection and tell everybody to walk.
And I've been taking my dog for over 30 years to Fort Funston for our exercise. And I have to say that I have not experienced one serious problem in all those 30 years. And
there's so many people out there walking their dogs. We need more space, not less space.
This is a city. This is, and I really feel sorry about them. They probably used to work at Yosemite or one of those beautiful parks, but they have to understand that this is a recreation area.
I'm a young athlete, and I think dog off-leashing parks help people exercise more, stay healthy. And I think we need more parks like this. People enjoy so much, as well as my girlfriend, family, and friends, and new people that we meet, and dogs that we interact with. So I think this is a very beautiful thing to have. Please do not take it away.
We have a family dog who's 13 years old, and as long as I can remember, we've always taken her to Ocean Beach and Fort Funston. And it's just some of the greatest times that I know that me, my friends, and my family have had.
I tell my clients don't go if the dog walkers aren't there, because there's tons of gang violence. Because when you have dogs in an area, you're not going to have homeless encampments, and you're not going to have a bunch of gang violence. And
when the park put a more substantial fence around the plover area, it actually helped greatly to prevent people from coming through the areas. So all they need to do is make provisions like that.
So I suggest next time the GGNRA wants to put out a draft plan, they do their homework before. Thank you.